Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and the Executive and the Deputy First Minister and I have been continuing our work on Northern Ireland's roadmap to recovery from COVID-19, and all of our departments are inputting into our plans, and it does remain a work in progress, and we will do further work over this next couple of days. So let me say we recognise the desire for clarity for businesses, for families and indeed for all of our society, but we're also fully committed to the scientific and specialist medical advice. And so the Executive have reviewed the health protection coronavirus regulations, as we are required to do by law every 3 weeks. And today we have decided not to make any alterations to the regulations. We still believe that they are needed and are proportionate to deal with the threat of the spread of the virus. In different regions, the virus is at different stages of progression, and the virus transmission rate, or R0, in Northern Ireland remains about 0.8, and that is higher than parts of England where the virus emerged earlier than it did here, and is more in keeping with the situation in Scotland and Wales. And whilst it is good that our R0 or our R0, as it's sometimes referred to, is at 0.8, and that is below the critical 1-0 marker, it is not yet as far below 1 as we would like it to be. And we recognise that our approach needs to be flexible and adaptable to change. And next week we will consider a number of minor adjustments to the restrictions and indeed to their interpretation. We had calls today with the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland at lunchtime and the Prime Minister this afternoon. And we expect to be in further dialogue with the Prime Minister over the weekend with a COBRA on Sunday. We do have to tread carefully in relation to COVID-19, as the Prime Minister has said, with maximum caution. But we know people are keen for reassurance that there will be light at the end of the tunnel. And part of the returning towards normal again, or the new normal, will be about building community confidence. And there are measures we can take to help enhance that confidence. And in that context, the Executive has agreed that the public consider the use of face coverings for short periods in enclosed spaces where social distancing is not possible. Now, it is important to differentiate between the use of face masks manufactured for a clinical setting and face coverings, which are often homemade or natural clothing items used by individuals in day-to-day life. And we are focused on face coverings. The Executive's decision is based on the view of our own specialist advice and is consistent with the position of SAGE, which has concluded that, on balance, there is enough evidence to support the recommendation of community use of cloth face masks for short periods in enclosed spaces where social distancing is not possible. We again salute the heroic efforts of those working in health and care across so many of our critical areas to keep Northern Ireland functioning. And we are aware of the challenges that are being faced in our care homes where there have been clusters of COVID-19. And we are conscious of the need to ensure that we are doing everything we can to support the efforts of those workers who have bravely stepped up to look after our precious residents. So before I finish, let me say something about the 75th anniversary of VE Day tomorrow. We do, of course, salute the bravery and sacrifice of those during World War II who faced down the terror of Nazism. And we could not have imagined 6 months ago that these celebrations would be taking place against the backdrop of another fight. However, this fight is very different. It involves an invisible enemy. And the death toll that COVID-19 exacts depend on people unwittingly sometimes spreading the virus. So while in normal circumstances people would be celebrating the 75th anniversary with commemorative events, barbecues and street parties, we must resist the temptation to do all of those things. And the best way we can honour those in World War II who fought for freedom and won, the best way we can honour those who are fighting for us today on the health front line, is to stay at home as much as possible and follow the public health advice. Our world is a long way away from its VE Day in the fight against coronavirus. And compared to the sacrifices asked of our parents and grandparents and sometimes great-grandparents, What is being asked of us now seems very small, but it is hugely important. COVID-19 has not been defeated, and it will not be defeated until a vaccine has been successfully trialled and made available. It thrives when there are gatherings, and if it is allowed to spread, it exacts a heavy toll on families and communities. So mark the VE Day anniversary at home and resist the temptation to bring together family and friends, because the last thing you would want to do is to find yourself regretting the loss of a loved one or a friend because you ignored the public health advice. And like the World War II generation, we will get through this, we will emerge stronger, we just have to be disciplined in order to get there. Thank you.
Thanks, Arlene. And I've no doubt that many people at home today will be feeling disappointed, particularly because we're not able at this time to lift any of the regulations. And I think that for some people, I think we all should take some credit in the fact that we're in the position that we are today because of all the good work of everybody at home and your adherence to the restrictions and actually following through in all of them. But I also know that while some people will be frustrated, you'll also feel today, you'll understand that we're in a precarious situation, and every decision we make will have an impact in terms of the lives that we're able to save as we move through this crisis. So the Executive had set out to do two major pieces of work. One, to review the regulations and the current social distancing restrictions that you're being asked to follow. And secondly, to chart out a roadmap for recovery and what move us towards the phase where we have a new normal life post-COVID-19. And you know from the start we had said that we needed to come at this crisis in three ways. One, in terms of responding, so the response, and then the recovery period, and then the renewal period. And each of those things can overlap at different periods. So we're still very much in the response. We're still in the fight back against COVID-19. But we're also in the space where we're planning for the recovery. And that's the light at the end of the tunnel, which we know that everybody wants to be able to see. So we reviewed all the regulations. We reviewed everything that we've been asking you to do right now. And we did that based on the scientific evidence that was available to us and all the medical evidence. And as Arlene says, that means that we're not in a position today that we're able to move on any of those regulations, or we're not able to relax anything at this time. We're still at a knife edge in terms of our fight back. And I want to explain for people just how we arrived at the position very briefly. Firstly, the Executive itself, we've adopted an approach which is to follow the evidence, which is to be guided by that we're going to take a step through this and be very incremental, and it'll be gradual, and we'll work our way through it. We're going to follow all of that evidence, and that we'll keep these things under review every 3 weeks, like we told you we would from the start. So the evidence that we looked at, and Arlene referred to this thing called the R0, and that's a measure about how the virus spreads across our community. And we need to keep that R0 number below 1. And we've been successful in doing that because of the work that you have all been doing. And that's why we need to continue to do that. If our R0 number goes above 1, that means that the virus is spreading very quickly among our community, and it means our health service will become overrun and we won't be able to cope. And at this current moment in time, when we looked at the evidence today, our R number is probably sitting at about 0.8 to 0.9, which means that that's why we're not in a position to move on any relaxations at this time. It demonstrates to us that we have no headroom for change at this moment in time. But we do want to also, as we always say, give people hope for the future and what we will be able to move on and when we can move on it. We've always said, and I'll say it again today, that we will not ask people to do things for any longer than is absolutely necessary. So the second piece of work is the roadmap. How do we plot away from the response phase into the recovery phase? So how do we give you that light? And we've very much again been guided by the scientific advice and the evidence that's available to us. And today in the Executive, we have looked at what is our strategic framework, what guides us to be able to work our way through that. And we want to be very clear to the public and give that reassurance that we will be able to, and we hope to be able to be in a position in the next number of days to be able to publish that roadmap that actually gives you the phases in which we will move through the next number of weeks and months. And I think it's important that we're very clear with that criteria which we will use to work our way through that. So that's to name a number of those things. So the first criteria would be that we have the transmission under control. Secondly, that our health service is able to cope and be able to have the capability to deal with potentially a second wave, that we just have the capacity in order to be able to respond to whatever COVID-19 throws at us over the next number of weeks and months ahead. And that includes that we have a full test, trace and isolate policy up and running, going at full throttle, to be able to allow us to be able to respond, because until we have a virus, or until we have a vaccination in place, then we have to live with this virus. So that test, trace and isolate is actually the key measure to be able to allow us to be able to lift some of the restrictions. We have to make sure that outbreaks are minimised in special settings, and in particular our nursing homes. I mean, and there's a lot of conversation around nursing homes right now, and rightly so, because as has been said this week, this is now where the battleground is. And we must put every bit of energy and effort and resource into making sure that we give everybody support that we can to our nursing homes at this time. We have to have our preventative measures in place. So what does our new norm look like? What are the social distancing measures that we're going to have to adhere to? And I think those things need to be all communicated out. And those things will help us be able to guide and chart a pathway forward and where we go next. And we want to be able to communicate that to you all over the course of the next number of days. But for now, and as we go into the bank holiday weekend, again, it's important that we don't take our foot off the pedal, and it's important that we remember that we're still saving lives, and it's important that we remember that, that we have a plan, that we're going to work our way through this, and that the partnership that we have with each other in terms of us trying to work our way through this as best that we can, but also yourselves at home being able to work your way through it. This partnership is really, really crucially important. That's how we'll be able to get through this as quickly as possible. So we ask for your continued support, and we aim to give you that light at the end of the tunnel over the course of the next number of days. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much, Tracy McGee, UTV. Can I ask, is there disagreement at the executive table over the content of the roadmap? And how much is it a factor that the executive wants to hear what Boris Johnson has to say on Monday before publishing the roadmap?
Thanks for that, Tracy. I don't think there's any disagreement at the executive table in relation to this roadmap. I think what we're trying to do is to make sure that it's a comprehensive strategy, that it's something that everybody is comfortable with and can sign up to, that it's understandable so that the public can engage with it as well. And as Michelle has said, that we deal with all of the issues around what is the primary purpose of this roadmap. It is around making sure that we continue to suppress the virus, that we make sure that our healthcare capacity is in place, that we relax the regulations when it's proportionate to do so, that we only keep them when they're necessary, and indeed that we continue to rely on evidence, and that's what we will do with the policy of test, trace and isolate. So I think there's agreement around the table. We are working through the paper, and I hope that we do have that paper towards the early part of next week, and that we can share it with the people of Northern Ireland so that they have a clear view as to the way forward, because we recognise these regulations are restrictive. We recognise they, as some people have called them, draconian. That being the case, we want to be able to say to people, stick with us, stick with the regulations, allow us to make sure that the transmission number does not go above 1, and we will be able then to look forward to the future. Because if we don't have compliance, Tracy, and I think this is important to say, if we don't have compliance, then what people are actually doing is lengthening the time when we can go back to normal. And that's important to say, because I know people are becoming frustrated, and perhaps at the edges there's been some fraying of compliance, and we recognise that. But if that breaks down, then actually you're prolonging the imposition of these regulations rather than moving to the future.
Yeah, so Tracy, this isn't about disagreement at the executive. We disagree on many occasions on many different things. Right now, this is not the space that we're in. This is about what's right. It's about trying to get it right. It is a very complex situation, but all the while, everybody's agreed that we are guided by the science and the medical evidence, that we chart our way through it. It's about preventing a second wave. It's about making sure we just get it absolutely spot on as best as you can right now. So that's the only reason why we don't have we have the first stage done today in terms of the review of the regs. We've got a guiding framework. We've got principles agreed. Then it's just about then what are the categories that come after that, which we hope to be able to publish at the early part of next week. Of course, we would have wanted to put it out today, but I think the public would probably thank us more for getting it right and putting it out at the start of the week whenever we have it over the line.
Good afternoon, First and Deputy First Ministers, Mark Devonport, BBC Northern Ireland. Two issues I want to inquire about today, if I may. First of all, care homes that the Deputy First Minister has referred to as the battleground. Do you accept that COVID-19 is now present in our care homes at a much more alarming rate than maybe originally envisaged? And are there any regrets on the part of the Executive about how the situation in our care homes has been handled? And then secondly, given the seriousness of the situation, which you both underlined many times here, what kind of an example did it set to the public for a DUP MLA to be shopping online during a meeting of the Health Committee when the Public Health Agency was giving evidence on its efforts to combat COVID-19?
Well, let me answer that first of all, because it's a matter for me as the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party to answer that. Alex has acknowledged that he should not have been doing that. And of course he should not have been shopping online at a time when we are in this health crisis. And he is writing to the Speaker and to the Chair of the Committee to apologise, and that's rightly so. He should do that. And I think what we all need to do is to ensure that we continue to work very hard to deal with all of the issues in front of us, to try and take on what is sometimes a lot of information coming at us at any one time, and to try and make sure that we understand it ourselves and then able to communicate out to the public. So of course it was wrong, Mark, and it should not have happened. So I want to say that very, very clearly. In terms of our care homes, it will not surprise you to know that we spent a considerable amount of time today at our executive discussing this issue, and the Health Minister said to us that that is where the real battle is now in our care homes. And he has informed the executive that there is considerable resource going into our care homes. The Public Health Agency is very much involved with it. The RQIA, as you know, is there as well, and there's a number of deep cleans going on in some of our care homes. I know there was a leaked paper from the RQIA today, and I want to say that was going onto our public dashboard and was meant for our public dashboard. So that information was going on for the public to see, Mark. And actually, we in Northern Ireland, nobody has more detail than we have in Northern Ireland across the UK in relation to our care homes. And it's unfortunate that that was leaked, because it was going out to the public after it had been checked. And the reason why we want all of that information is so that we can try and manage the situation. Because I've said many times from this platform that those people in our care and nursing homes are our most precious and vulnerable people, and we need to do all that we can. The Health Minister was able to tell us today that 70 dental students have gone into care homes to help provide resource there, and he is looking at other ways to move forward, including safe home pilots, where staff actually move into the homes and don't come out of the homes. They stay there to keep the homes COVID-free. So there's a number of initiatives going on, Mark. I want to reassure you that the Executive takes the issue of care homes very, very seriously indeed.
If you're someone out there who has a loved one in a care home right now, and you read the reports every day and the issues that have been raised around care homes, it's only natural and normal that you'll be up to the ceiling. You'll be absolutely so anxious about what's happening in your loved one, especially given the fact that you haven't even been able to get in to see them for such a long period of time. For some people, maybe it's nearly, it's over 2 months since they've actually been able to get in to see their loved ones. I think there's a varying pattern in terms of the nursing homes, and there's some nursing homes that are completely free. There's some care homes that have seriously concerning numbers, and there needs to be considerable effort put in there. You asked about regrets. I don't want to have regrets on the other side of this. We want to know that every day that we're asking the right questions and that we're steering things in the right direction. It's more than words just to say we need to look after our vulnerable. We need to do everything that we need to do, and that means pulling out all the stops. So I welcome the additional investment work for care homes. I welcome the fact that there's NHS staff going into work in care homes. I welcome all these initiatives, and if we have to keep doing more, then that's what we have to do. We're in this together. We're in this pandemic together, and we need to work our way through it together. And if I know that on this platform a couple of days ago, the Health Minister said that the battleground is now in our care homes, well then that's where we all should be there fighting.
First Minister, Deputy First Minister David Young from PA. Just a question, if you don't mind, about messaging. There's a suggestion that the UK government on Sunday and Monday will move away from the stay-at-home message, and that's gone down not so well with Nicola Sturgeon today. She'd be of a position that that message should well and truly stay in place. Is it your view that the stay-at-home message should be nuanced anyway going forward, or are we still in a place where that has to be the primary message to the public? And just in regard to that general subject, I think there's some public confusion in regard to the latitude Stormont may have to diverge from the message Boris Johnson may give on Sunday. Can you just explain that to the public? To what degree Stormont can set its own recovery plan and to what extent it has to follow the Prime Minister's?
Well, we have our own public health agency, we have our own medical advice, we can follow our own guidance, we can follow our own public health message, and the message should be stay at home. The message is stay at home, and that needs to continue there. And there can be no room for confusion. We don't need a confused picture. We can already see all around us, you know, some fraying at the edges in terms of people getting anxious, perhaps moving around more than they should be. And you don't want to compound that even further by having a confused public health message. So the message very clearly from us is that people must stay at home. Only go out whenever you, as per the regulations, only go out whenever you have to, because you can't work at home, because you need to go to you get medicines or food. The restrictions that have been laid down, that's still the space that we're in. That's the primacy. That message still has primacy.
Well, and it'll not surprise you to know, David, that this was discussed during our call with the Prime Minister earlier on in relation to the stay-home message. And you're right, we do have different legal obligations, and each of the devolved administrations have our own set of coronavirus regulations. It's why we review ours at the appropriate time, given the 3-week cycle, why Nicola Sturgeon does hers, why Mark Drakeford does his, and why the Prime Minister looks at the regulations in respect of England. And there was an acknowledgement today that messaging is so important, that we have that clarity of messaging. I think it works best when it's a Four Nations message, and that was acknowledged by Nicola Sturgeon today. But I do also say that I don't think the Prime Minister will be moving dramatically away from that stay-home message. That's certainly what I got from him on our call today. I think some of the London press, of course not the press in Northern Ireland, have maybe exaggerated what's coming on Sunday. I get the sense that they know that there is a need to continue to suppress the virus right across the United Kingdom, and I think that that is what the Prime Minister will be saying.
First Minister, just following on from David's question and your answer there, you seem to have made clear that you really want to see the whole UK moving as one, if that's possible. But is it not the case that if the UK does not move as one, and if Northern Ireland has got different factors, I mean, it's right for us to diverge, that therefore it is quite logical, for instance, to have checks or even a stop on flights from somewhere like London, because we're just in very different situations. And for the Deputy First Minister, some people are suggesting that really it's reckless to even be talking about how to exit the lockdown. Is that a view that you share, or do you think the public have a right to be informed about this? And can you maybe clarify whether you want to see the executive move out of lockdown in the same way as the Republic at the same time, or do you still think that here in the North we shouldn't be setting dates for that at this point?
Well, when we spoke to the Prime Minister today, Sam, he talked about the importance of the national, regional and local. So there is an acceptance that, of course, as a devolved administration, we have to look at our own evidence. We have our own Northern Ireland modelling. We have our own Chief Medical Officer, our own Chief Scientific Officer, and they will advise. And that's why when we're talking about the R0 number, we can plot where it is in Northern Ireland. Nicola can do the same in Scotland. And then in London, we're told that the R0 number may be at around 0.5. So their R0 number is much lower. And that's because they were ahead of us in terms of the spread of the virus initially. And so they're further along, if you like, in terms of dealing with the virus. So to your point around flights from London, of course, if these are UK citizens and London citizens, actually the transmission is lower in London than it is actually in Northern Ireland. And I think the Prime Minister will be saying something around the flights issue in terms of international flights. But we should also remember that the whole of the island of Ireland and the whole of Great Britain is in a common travel area. So we are actually outside of Schengen, in a common travel area, so people can move freely between the British Isles, and they can do that in a way, as you know, even after Brexit, without any checks. So it's important to remember that point as well when we're talking about people moving between different parts of the UK.
And can I just repeat the message that the Executive is at one in terms of how we move our way through this? We have agreed a framework and a set of guiding principles to be able to chart our way from the response phase into the recovery phase. We collectively agree that we need another 3 weeks of the regulations because of where we're at in terms of the virus spread. We also collectively agree that we need to be guided by criteria as opposed to being date-led, because I think that's important. And we also collectively agree that we are all elected here to do a job for the people that we represent, and we use our own science, we use our own modelling, we work our way through all of those things. It's not about following Dublin or London, it's about doing what's right for people here and using best practice. And obviously I think that in terms of the all-island approach, we live on an island, we have that geographical advantage. It's not about following lockstep, it's about making sure that we're being very practical, joined up where we can be, and use that to the advantage of our people.
Hi, Alison Morris from the Irish News. Can you tell me, you've already indicated that test, trace and isolate will be part of the exit roadmap. Has the capacity be put in place in relation to that? Have the Executive decided which app that they're going to use for that? Will it be the one that the Irish Republic have decided to use, or will it be the UK one? And also, we know that it was said earlier this week that the Executive were not given a sight in advance of the Republic's roadmap to exit. Have you been, or will you be given an advance sighting of the roadmap to exit from the UK, expected to be announced by Boris Johnson at the weekend?
Well, Alison, as I said, we've already been speaking to the Prime Minister this afternoon. We have another engagement with him on Sunday around his decisions around the roadmap. I think it's important that we continue to have those conversations. In terms of the test, trace, isolate policy, one of the reasons why we're rolling forward the regulations again now is because we want to make sure that we have the testing capacity in place. It's important that we have those people ready, trained up to be able to do the community testing. In terms of the app, the Department of Health is working with NHS England to make sure that whatever app comes here in Northern Ireland is able to speak to the app in the Republic of Ireland. And I know there are some challenges around that, given that the databases are slightly different, but we're still working on that. Alison, it would be wrong for us not to be a part of course, the UK app. But of course we recognise, and I think the Prime Minister recognises, that we need to be able to share information across the border with colleagues in the Republic of Ireland as well. So that's important for us, and that's something that we're working on.
Just in terms of the app, Alison, this is something that I have raised with the Health Minister. I think it's important that as people move freely across this island, that they're able to, that the app, whatever app is used by Dublin or ourselves here, they have to be able to talk to each other. It's much preferable that actually across this island and across Britain, that there's one app that actually everybody could use, because that would make sense as people travel around. But I think, just my own personal view in terms of the type of app that you use, I wouldn't favour one that's centralised in terms of people's information. I certainly would favour one that is decentralised. People hold their own information on their phone, but obviously it helps in terms of the contact tracing. There are three main elements to, I suppose, to the strategy for getting us out of the place that we are right now. And the most important of those, well, I suppose the three of the things is that you have contact testing and then contact tracing in place, that you're shielding your vulnerable individuals and groups, that you get your public messaging right around social distancing. But the most important one of those three is that you actually have spot on your testing and your contact tracing. So the capacity is being built up. We're now in a period where we have 3 weeks to get, in terms of the regulations that are currently going to be maintained. So we have 3 weeks to get that to the point where actually we can start to lift things, because we've built the capacity up, and we intend to make sure that that's what's happening. We now have the group set up in terms of the contact tracing, but that needs to be significantly ramped up in order for us to be able to ease the restrictions. It's a vital part of us being able to ease restrictions. Thank you.